now, class of 2019, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you your commencement speaker, Dr. Matt Higgins.
Thank you. Thank you, Philo. Can I still call you that now that you're... Okay, good. All right, excellent. It's so incredible and overwhelming to be back here today. It's really like a warm bath and coming home. And I have some good news and bad news to report. Queens College is indeed like a family. And like a family, they remember everything that sometimes you wish they would forget. And I was walking down as we were about to get started with the procession, and it's a heady moment. I'm standing behind the chancellor and some of the faculty I went to school with. And one of the administrators came up and said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I interrupt? Are you, Matthew Higgins?" I said, "Indeed I am." And he said, "You went to school here in the 90s?" And I said, "I did." He's like, "And you ran for president of the school, right?" I said, "Yes." "You lost really badly, right? I think I remember that election." And I said, I think I just got punked on the way to a heady moment. Also a metaphor for life, though, at those most heady moments when you probably need to be brought down to earth, somebody comes along and does it for you. So it's truly extraordinary to be back. And what's incredible to think that I wasn't exactly a stellar student when I walked in here. As you know, I had my GED, and to think that I'd walk out of campus 28 years later as a doctor with a PhD is pretty extraordinary, and only in America. I have incredible memories that started here at Queens College, and many of them are extremely formative. And one of the earliest ones actually took place a few steps from here over at Powdermaker Hall. Am I pointing in the right spot? I think I am. Right, Powdermaker Hall. It was the summer of 1983, and I was a 9-year-old, freckled, curly-haired little boy sitting in the back of a classroom in Powdermaker, and it was a suffocating, hot, humid morning in July. I don't think we had air conditionings back then. It was these sort of grimy windows that you had to crack open halfway to get air. And I was doodling on the desk, and my face was plastered, and I was looking out of the corner of my eye, acting like I wasn't paying attention, and I'm looking at this woman sitting next to me and thinking, it's a Saturday, it's the summertime, what is my mother doing in this classroom? And as a 9-year-old kid, you don't totally get it. And her name was, I want to tell you a little bit about her today. Her name was Linda Joy Higgins, and she never had it easy as a kid. She had a childhood of abuse and poverty, and it was just impossible for her to finish school. And unfortunately, she ended up with 4 rotten, miserable boys, myself and my brother. And we were all raised in a shoebox, crammed little rent-stabilized apartment on Springfield Boulevard in Queens, just a few miles from over here. And she would spend weekday afternoons on her hands and knees cleaning apartments for frail elderly citizens. And on the weekends, we would get on the Q27. I don't know how many know the Q27, but it runs along Springfield Boulevard. Yes, shout out for Q27. And we didn't have a car, driver's license or anything else, and we would take the Q27 to Flushing, 2 hours round trip to visit church food pantries. And we would come back on the bus with these boxes of food, or canned rice and beans and whatnot. And I would think, why do we have to take a bus all the way to Flushing? Aren't there churches in Bayside? And in retrospect, she was embarrassed, of course, of our upbringing. But what she was even more embarrassed about was her lack of education, because Mom was brilliant. She worshipped everything about books. I mean, she loved the smell of yellowing paper in the library and the endless ways you could express a thought. So there's a clear demarcation line that runs through the middle of my childhood, marked by BC and AC, and it was the time before college and the time after college. From the day she stepped foot on this campus, her life revolved around this school, and she had finally mustered the dignity to walk down Springfield Boulevard to Queensborough Community College. Any Queensborough here to represent? There you go. Good. And a lot of times Queensborough is the starting point, right, for your life and a launching pad. So she walked down Springfield Boulevard and got the courage to get her GED at age 38 and step foot at Queens College. And so, thank you. And from that moment on, everything revolved around it. I mean, it unlocked a world that she never knew existed, and of these professors that cared so much. And I still remember their names to this day. 30 years later, there was Judith Summerfield. I think now she's 78 years old, from creative writing. Anybody have Judith? And I remember her because it was the first person in my mother's life who said, "You have a gift," right? And Bob Factor, he was a history professor. He's since passed. But he was the first person to tell my mom that she was gifted intellectually and you should join the History Phi Beta Kappa Society. And interesting, as we were walking down this procession, I had another moment to recover the first, unfortunate one. A professor reached into the line. He said, "Hey, I just want to say hello. I'm Dean Savage. Your mother was one of my favorite students." I'm like, "You got to be." And then, of course, I get teary and I can barely walk. But But that's Queens College, right? So it was an incredibly special place. She'd come home at night, and she would call them her friends, and she would recount the stories, of Kylie and Powdermaker and, Jefferson and Rosenthal. She would tell us the stories about the buildings. She just loved everything about it. And I remember one evening, she was smiling with pride because she had had a tug-of-war with a mugger on Union Turnpike outside a diner. And she had pleaded with him, please, take my money, just let me keep my textbooks. And true story, he dumped her contents on a car hood, let her take her books, and ran off. And that's how much she fought for her education. So I always just think some people live paycheck to paycheck, and here we live, Pell Grant to Pell Grant. And for the next 12 years, my mom found new and clever reasons to never leave here. She took endless amounts of credits pursuing 3 degrees, and then she had an epiphany. She would get her master's degree in library studies, and then she'd never have to leave the library again. All right, library status representative. And, so really this quad became her oasis, and through everything from life's trials, divorce, poverty, failing knees, and ultimately fading health. And looking back throughout her years here, though she was slowly dying, she was finally living. So, she passed away when I was 26, but even though she never reaped any financial reward from her education, she left this campus and this earth with something much more important than degrees or material possessions. Queens College gave her her dignity. If she had lived, she would have devoted her life to books and education, and that's why I'm so proud to talk about today 2 students in the graduating class that had received the Linda J. Higgins Empowerment Scholarship, often given to single parents who followed a similar path as my mother. Tamika Edwards Hepburn and Rosanna Batista, will you stand up again? So stay with me for a moment. I had the honor of meeting Tamika and Rosanna right before the ceremony, and what's incredible is they both have their kids here. I think you have an 8 and a 14-year-old and 10-year-old Gregory somewhere in the back, wherever you are, Gregory. I just want you to know something, and for everyone here who's gone through these struggles, just as that 9-year-old little boy in Powdermaker was looking at his mother and saying, this is incredible, your kids, your family right now are marveling at your journey. And now the good part begins, right? You guys represent the warrior class of 2019 who've overcome language barriers, financial hardships, raising kids, working multiple jobs, hustling, doing whatever it would take to obtain the greatest tool of empowerment civilization has ever conceived, an education. So please give yourselves a round of applause. So my fellow Queens graduates, I have been away from QC for 21 years, and I'm back to present my scouting report from the world beyond these campus walls. And the most encouraging news I offer is that the die is never cast. It turns out that life is not defined by what happened to you, but what happens next. No one is destined to be a victim. The circumstances that I was born into on Springfield Boulevard in that little apartment did not in any way dictate my life. The choices I made to change those circumstances did. And looking back on those darkest moments, the most important choice I ever made was simple: keep moving forward. And so long as you get up and make even the most imperceptible move in the right direction, things always get incrementally better. And picture your life as a sailboat. And as a kid, of course, I wasn't going out there sailing, but I love some of the metaphors in life that sailboats offer, and one of them in particular. When you're on a sailboat and you're facing strong headwinds, you can either turn back, surrender your fate to the elements, or let the wind carry you in whatever direction you want. Or you can fight to go where you want to go. But to move forward in the face of headwinds, the boat must do what is called tacking. It must harness the violent energy of the wind thrust against its sails and tack upwind, tacking left, and then tacking right as a means of zigzagging in the force of nature. Under these conditions, the boat is often heeled, which means it's just crashing against the waves. If you were standing on that tacking sailboat in a storm, winds lashing your face, large ocean swells blocking your line of sight, the journey would feel utterly hopeless. You'd feel like you're actually going nowhere. But if at that same moment you were to look down from the heavens upon that tiny little sailboat in a vast ocean, you would see yourself with both hands firmly at the helm, face weathered but resolute, moving left, moving right, moving forward. This will be your life. Sometimes you will be your own worst enemy, ignoring your own internal navigation system to follow someone else's North Star. Don't do that. Look inward. Many days your forward progress will be stalled by forces entirely within your control. And for those moments, I give you 2 pieces of advice ripped from the pages of my own life. First, when everything is on the line and the stakes are the highest, trust your instincts to make the final call. Now, I want to share a story about my last day at Cardozo High School and when I was 16 years old. Cardozo! I love it. Well, this is not a good ending, but but you can represent me. But back then, when you dropped out, you first had to run a gauntlet, which I like to think of as the academic version of a walk of shame. Before they would release you, you had to go to each classroom in session with your head down and return your textbooks, and it was god-awfully humiliating. But I remember knocking on the door, shuffling into one of the classes, and sheepishly stretching out my hands with the book, and the teacher turned to me. He goes, "Oh, Higgins, what a waste. I'll see you at McDonald's," and kind of chuckled. I said, okay. I began to walk out. I was about to open the door, and I turned around, and I said, "You know what? If you see me at McDonald's, it's because I bought it." And then I walked out. Thank you. All right, well, now here's the reality. I got out of the school, and I sat on the steps of Cardozo alone, unpacked a cigarette, and thought, you know what? He might be right. I may have just thrown my entire life away. And at the time, I was living a secret life. Home was a car crash unfolding in slow motion. We were getting by on Spam and Steakums and government cheese in the refrigerator. And as a kid, the last thing you want anyone to know is just how truly poor you are. So I masked my poverty with designer jeans, Jordache at the time, or Guess for those who remember. But I was working overnights at a deli on Woodhaven and Metropolitan, for those Ozone Park residents, and coming home to sleep on a dog-worn mattress on the floor. And all the while, I could sense my mother was just slowly slipping away. And since no one had come to the rescue yet, I assumed help was not on the horizon, and that I had to do something. So I hatched a plan to drop out of high school at 16, take my GED, and start Queens College immediately. My thesis was straightforward. A college student could land a better paying job than the $5 an hour I was making slinging Marlboros at the Quick Stop. My well-meaning guidance counselor, Mr. Barkin, I remember him, said the plan was pure insanity. I was throwing my entire life away. The stigma of being a high school dropout would cling to me forever. But he didn't have the full story. No one ever has the full story. After enrolling at Queens College, I answered an ad in the Queens Tribune to collect petition signatures for Congressman Gary Ackerman, earning $9 an hour. But when I got to the bold letters on the bottom, it said, college students only. I remember when I showed up with my baby face at Congressman Ackerman's headquarters on Northern Boulevard, and they wanted to see proof I was in fact a college student, and I was hired. And after a summer of handing out flyers, all of us were to be let go. I did not want to be fired. I could not be fired. In 1992, personal computers were still a mystery to anyone over 40, proof that some things actually do never change. And the campaign manager at the time, Alan Gershony, he told me he couldn't figure out how to merge these damn letters. And so I raised my hand, and I said, oh, I know about computers, I know a ton, I'm young. And he said, okay, if you do, then go figure out how to merge these letters. And I remember sitting there, all through the night, crawling under a desk, practically crying because I just couldn't figure out how to make the address line line up with those little plastic envelopes. And I was like, if I don't have these done by the time the sun runs out, they're gonna run me out of here and realize that I've completely bluffed this entire thing. But I remember when that sun rose and Alan walked into the office, I was sitting on a stack of those damn letters. And I discovered the most important ingredient to professional success that still applies today. Make yourself indispensable at whatever task you're doing, no matter how menial, and you'll always have a job. And 4 years after graduating in college in 1998, and too many jobs to explain, I had achieved what I had set out to do, escape poverty. I can trace back most of my good fortune to that single leap of faith on the steps of Cardozo, when I trusted my instincts against all the conventional thinking in the world. Society conditions us to look outside ourselves for the answers to our most vexing problems. We are looking in the wrong place, and deep down we know it. God gave us intuition for the very times in life when we need to operate without a manual. So ask questions, find mentors, but never outsource your judgment to another, and always trust your instincts. My second piece of advice, I need to bring you to Los Angeles on the set of a TV show you may have heard of called Shark Tank. And 2 years, this is how it all began. 2 years ago, I was sitting on the couch with my 10-year-old son watching our favorite show, and we had seen almost all the episodes. And I love how Shark Tank embodies this American notion that rejects the birthright, that anyone, anywhere, can start out at Queens College with a GED, and you can go anywhere you want, so long as you have the energy and the drive to do it. And, at one point, my son was admiring Mr. Wonderful. I don't know how many watch the show, but Mr. Wonderful always comes up with these crazy deals, these royalty deals that don't happen in real life. And he was admiring him, and I turned to him, I said, like Dad could be a shark. And my son turns to me, he's like, yeah, right, Dad, good luck with that. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna be a shark. I actually could do this. I have what it takes. This is what I do daily, and I love the show. And so for the next year, meetings in LA, all of the most improbable journey you could ever imagine. A year later, I walked onto the set of Shark Tank and took the empty chair next to Lori Greiner and Mr. Wonderful. And it was 9 a.m. and I remember the producer yelled action and the bright stage lights light up, and thus began the longest 1 minute of my entire life. I simply froze like a deer in the headlights, and I was about to get eaten alive by some very voracious sharks. What's interesting, soon the internal dialogue began, and I think everyone in this audience knows what I'm talking about. You don't belong here. This is completely nuts. You're an imposter. And by the way, it's totally going to backfire because your son's not going to be able to show his face in school by the time you screw this up. And toward the end of the most protracted minute of my entire life, Mark Cuban leans across the chairs and said something that I don't remember. It started with, "Hey, Matt." But what I heard in my head was, "Hey, Matt, did you really come this far in life to blow it all away right now?" And, you know, at that very moment, I'm telling you, the great poet, name is Eminem from Detroit, popped into my head. And you all know the song. If you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted, would you capture it or just let it slip? And I'm telling you, I grabbed that voice in my head by the scruff and I said, "Listen, you better cut that out. You are not helping. I belong here because I am here." And I fought every challenge that's come my way. 7 years at Queens College, by the way. Proud of that. Proud of that. Not 6. Working 2 jobs, 4 years of Fordham Law School at night, 9/11, building my own business. I've got this. And when that little bit of self-talk, I spent the next 10 hours giving the performance of my life. And I loved every other minute of it. You know, what I found in life is that the exact moment we stretch beyond our limitations, on the brink of achieving our wildest dreams, we conjure an enemy. It is the voice of doubt that labels us an imposter. Anyone who has ever achieved greatness, as I know you will, first has to slay that beast. If you master the internal dialogue in your mind, you will accomplish anything you want. So my advice, do daily affirmations, meditate, sing in the shower, talk to yourself in the bathroom stall before that incredible interview. Do it your way, but do whatever it takes to train the voice in your head to be your biggest ally, because the most impactful conversations you will have in life will be with yourself. Now, even if you zoned out today, thank you. Now, even if you zoned out today and you weren't paying attention to my address, I have one piece of advice which is most important, and that is the idea that things do keep getting better as long as you keep moving forward. But they don't get better without a catalyst. Of all the choices you make in life, none matter more than what you will do in the face of injustice, especially when you are not the target. I'll leave it today with a story about a classmate of mine. I ran for president of Queens College, like I told you, in a chapter I'd rather forget, and I was beaten terribly. It was my first stinging failure, but everything happens for a reason, and the universe had a plan for all of us that day. My opponent was the late, great Jose Peralta, a kind, wonderful, yes. Jose was a great guy and lived a great life, and that campaign launched Jose into a lifetime of public service, and he went on to have a great career in the State Assembly and the State Senate. Jose's running mate for class president was Alan Van Capel. When Alan graduated in 1997 and sat exactly where you sit, more than 60% of Americans opposed the idea of marriage equality. Think about that. All of his fellow graduates that day had a choice. Do I remain silent? Do I accept the status quo? Do I hope that somebody else will do something about it? Or do I do something about it? Alan did something. He became the leader of an advocacy group called Empire State Pride Agenda. He fought to change hearts and minds, and when that didn't work, he changed out the politicians. After marriage equality was narrowly defeated in the Senate in 2009, Alan went to work and campaigned for his old Queens College running mate, Jose Peralta, to join the Senate. Jose won. 2 years later, the state senator from Corona, Queens, Jose Peralta, cast one of the deciding 33 votes to make marriage equality the law of New York State. And I believe Alan is here today. Alan, where? Let me see you. Alan Van Capel. Alan, on behalf of civilization, thank you for defeating me in that election, because I hope it played a small part in all the amazing work you've done since leaving here. I mean, what's extraordinary, for all those days you look around in our political climate, whatever bothers you about society, think about it. One generation later, your generation the numbers have completely flipped. Almost 70% of Americans now support marriage equality. So my advice, things get better, but not without a catalyst. Don't sit idly by. If you open your eyes wide enough, you'll see that something is happening in the world right now that we find acceptable today and will be ashamed of tomorrow. I can't tell you what that is. That's up to your generation to tell all of us on the days what needs to change and appeal to our better selves. I know you're up to the challenge because I know how you were constructed. I know what you're made of. I know it's in your factory settings because I have the same. Queens College is a place where the promise of an excellent education is not contingent on means or who you know, but on mettle and who you are. And you have more of it than any other student body in the country. Congratulations, class of 2019. Now go out there and make us proud.